So today I'm going to do another video talking about underrated books. I've done this before, I'll link it in the corner as well as down in the description, and I will do my best not to repeat any books that I've talked about in a previous video. Well, in a previous underrated recs video. So naturally, when you do an underrated recommendations video, this does not mean that you've never heard of these books before, because that would simply be impossible. Some of these books you will have definitely heard of before, but this is more just a focus on books that are not talked about on BookTube, my platform, very often. So if you watch a lot of BookTube, you maybe haven't heard very many people talk about these books. I think they're underrated here where I live, so I'm gonna show them a little bit of love, and maybe you'll have the opportunity to check out some new books that aren't already constantly crammed down your throat. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is going to be a classic. So once again, it's very possible that you've heard it before. You just probably haven't heard of it talked about here very often. And it's going to be I Capture the Castle. This is a classic that I don't hear talked about ever. The author is Dottie Smith. She wrote 101 Dalmatians, which you maybe have heard of. So this follows a 17-year-old girl named Carissa. She and her family live in a dilapidated, rundown castle. And Carissa is working on her writing skill, and so this book is told through her journals as she discusses her family life, their current financial situation, and just follows her over 6 months as her castle and her family go through some major transformations. I loved the detail of this book, the detail of the castle and their surroundings, as well as the detail of the situation of their very destitute life, especially at the beginning. And I also loved the dynamics of this family. It was definitely a loyal yet not so healthy family in a lot of ways. And oh my gosh, it read like a drama. In this book, a couple of characters fall in love and there's a whole bunch of angst, and it literally, it read like a teenage drama. And I just think that even if you're not accustomed to classics, you will have to get accustomed to a different writing style and a lot more detail in your writing. But as far as the story itself, even if you're fairly new to classics, this is one that would be so easy to get sucked into because it is so easy. Like, it's so chaotic and drama filled, and you latch onto these characters, and I just think that it's such an easy book to get sucked into and read ridiculously fast. There are elements to the story that I didn't love entirely, but as a whole, it was such an enjoyable read. I especially think people that primarily read YA books would be really into this particular classic, and I think just in general, you should check it out. Next we have East, which is a middle grade book. I don't read a lot of middle grade, but I do have a couple middle grades on this list. So I think East was actually pretty popular back in the day. I never read it as a kid. I actually read it as an adult because one of my friends, Jen from the channel The Book Refuge, it's one of her favorite books. So I read it, annotated it, and sent it off to her, and it was such a good book. It's based off of this classic fairy tale, and I didn't like the original tale. But East took the original tale, which is very, very similar to Beauty and the Beast, which I love the original Beauty and the Beast. And it took that classic and filled in the gaps that were in the classic fairy tale, and all the things that I wanted from the classic, East provided. And all the things that I didn't like about the classic, East changed and made better. And I am a huge lover of classics, and I also love retellings. And I rarely will find a retelling that I like better than the classic. I just like reimaginings of stories that I love so much. But I really do think that East took something that bare bones could have been cool, but I didn't like so much, and made it something that I really, really loved. Next, we have a book that I've talked about a fair bit on my channel, so go ahead and hit the skip a couple times if you're tired of me talking about it, and that's An Unkindness of Magicians. I've actually talked about it in a recent video, so I'll try to be brief. An Unkindness of Magicians is about an unseen world, a magical world that, in my last video I said London, but I think it's actually New York. Someone corrected me in the comments, so thank you for that. But anyway, it's outside of a major city, and the unseen world has a magical tournament that goes on once every, I want to say 30 years. But anyway, this tournament comes early, and it's where these magical houses where the wizards have loyalties to, they face off. It's brutal, it's bloody, It's dark, and it's a ride. And the winner of the tournament is the new ruler, essentially. They make the laws, they can do whatever they want, so you really, really want to come out on top. This book starts when Sydney comes into the picture. She has no loyalty to any house. No one knows where she came from, what her background is, but we do know that she's trying to win, and she has some pretty vengeful motives. The description makes it sound a lot like Harry Potter, and people do call this the adult Harry Potter, which I can totally see a little bit, but it's very different. It's very unique. It's a lot darker and grittier. Again, there are certain things that I didn't think were perfectly executed in this book, but it's such a good read, or at least I thought it was. And it's getting a sequel now, which is awesome. Next we have To Kill a Kingdom. I just got up and tried to find it, but I forgot I gave it to Daniel because he wants to read it. Although I don't know he will. And also I just said the title wrong. Anyway, there's the cover. I can't remember the title right now. This book, okay, so if you've been following me for a long time, you already know this, but let me tell you again. I am borderline obsessed with siren and mermaid mythology. The mythology of sirens and mermaids is so dark and brutal and bloody. And I have read so many books about mermaids and sirens trying to find a book that accurately depicts the myth of sirens and mermaids, which are basically the same thing. If you look into it, they're the same thing, but they're different cultures that originated the same story. It doesn't matter. Every retelling I've read, or almost every retelling I've read, not retelling, almost every story I've read that features sirens and mermaids, even if it claims that it's going to be a dark siren tale, it's not. It's romanticized creatures that are mildly dark. I wanted a book that was brutal and bloody, and these creatures were evil, and I got it. I finally got it. So this book follows oceanographers, which, if you didn't know, I used to want to be an oceanographer. I took oceanography in college, and it's awesome. I love the ocean. So there was an event that happened around the Mariana Trench. Mariana. It's pronounced Mariana. The deepest part of the ocean. And this group of oceanographers, or this company, hired a bunch of oceanographers and is taking them to that location where they want them to study and try to find sirens or mermaids. Both terms are used in this book. So this crew of oceanographers, most of them don't believe that these creatures exist, but they're going along for the ride for the sake of the research that they're going to have access to. And they're going to find these creatures, and all I'm going to say is that they find them, and it is exactly what I wanted out of this kind of book. Again, don't love everything about it. It was a really slow start. We could have picked it up a lot faster. There's a huge cast of characters, and the beginning gives us a lot of time to establish a lot of the characters, not even all of them, which is fine. I have no problem with a huge cast of characters, but it was a very slow beginning, and then the ending was not fully satisfying, but all of that is talked about in my Goodreads review in the spoiler section. But I still highly recommend this book. I loved this book so much. It's classified as horror, but I really think it's more suspense. Either way, y'all should read this. Next, let's do some YA books. I have 2 books by the same author. We have A Quiet Kind of Thunder and Goodbye Perfect. A Quiet Kind of Thunder follows a girl who has very extreme anxiety, and because of that, she has selective mutism, which means that she can speak, she has the ability to speak, but in certain situations and around certain people, she loses the ability to speak. And this is a young adult contemporary, and her love interest is deaf. So he speaks sign language and teaches her how to use sign language, and it's adorable. Goodbye Perfect is about a 14-year-old, I think? Yeah, 14-year-old girl. Okay, it's about a 14-year-old girl whose best friend, who is also 14, runs off with her 26-year-old teacher. So I loved this book for the purpose it served. I will say that it takes the perspective of a girl who's loyal to her best friend. Her best friend has fallen in love and has found the person for them, and the protagonist is loyal to her best friend and doesn't want to tell the adults and the police where her best friend has gone off to, and doesn't want to really give any information because she doesn't get it. She doesn't get what the problem is. Like, if they're in love, then who cares? So as an adult reading it, I could see how it could be frustrating, because as an adult, you're looking at it and you're saying, hi, that's pedophilia, that's a power imbalance, that's horrifying. But as a kid, you don't always get it. And I loved this book because it took the perspective of someone who didn't get it and who slowly through the book got it. And she learns about how her teacher coerced her and prepped her to run away, manipulated her. She gets to read letters between them, and she slowly realizes why this power imbalance is so messed up. It's a young adult book, and I think it's an important young adult book, because a lot of times when you're in high school and you have a crush on your professor or your teacher, and I think it's important to understand why this is not okay. And I think that this book does an excellent job of explaining this to teens that maybe don't get it yet. In general, I don't like the way this author ends books. I think that in both of these books, the author goes for this big, extravagant, explosive ending that is wholly unnecessary for the book. But both of these books, as a whole, I loved, and I just kind of pretend that the ending doesn't happen. Trying to give balanced recommendations and tell you that they're what I don't like about the book too, but I still highly recommend all of these. Let's go for another classic. We're going to talk about Rebecca, which is definitely not a book that you've heard of this. This is a classic thriller. Some people call it a murder mystery, but I definitely don't think you should go in thinking of it that way. You should just think of it as a domestic thriller. So this follows, again, a young girl who meets a guy and falls into obsession. It's certainly not love. She falls into this really unhealthy obsession with this guy who's not that cool. They get married, run off together, and then unravel the fact that his life is a little bit complicated. We'll stick with that plotline. It's a thriller. You don't want to know too much. A lot of stuff goes down. It is paced like a domestic thriller. So it is a very slow pacing, more about a day in the life, slowly unraveling how disturbed everybody in this book is. Everyone. And the things that have happened before the book started. It was so good. It was so good. I've recommended this to so many people, and I love this book so much. I love unraveling how seemingly normal people can be so not. And this book did such a good job at it, and it kept me on the edge of my seat, and I loved it so much, and I highly recommend it. I always link every book I talk about in the description of my videos. I will link this specific edition in case you want it. Okay, next let's do an adult contemporary. I'm trying to make this. I know I have subscribers that read a lot of different kinds of books, and I'm trying to help y'all out. Okay, close enough to touch. So this is an adult contemporary. It's about a woman who is allergic to human skin. She can't touch people without gloves on. She can't be hugged by people without having a blanket wrapped around her. It's unfortunate. Reading this book, so it's a contemporary, which means that it's about two people falling in love. And it has a huge focus on, again, her anxiety, but the anxiety is wrapped around and stemming from her allergies. Reading this book was a really interesting experience for me because I have very severe allergies, not to do with touching people, but food allergies. And some of them are like, you have just a little bit and you lose the ability to breathe. And it's one of those things where it's constantly on my mind, especially if I'm I don't eat outside of my home very often at all. I don't really eat out very often. I don't eat at other people's houses because the things that I'm allergic to are really common things, and even if I say, hey, here's what I'm allergic to, people still put it in their foods and forget. And I've just had too many close calls. So it's something that I constantly think about. It's something that I tailor my life around. It's something that I have to consider every time I leave the house. And it was a weird experience reading this book because, how often do you read books about severe allergies? And it was weird to see myself represented so strongly in a book. in like such a unique way. The story itself was really sweet. The romance was adorable. Once again, I'm gonna complain. I did not love the way this one ended, but again, it didn't ruin the experience. I really enjoyed reading this book as a whole. And if you like contemporaries, you should read this. Okay, I'm gonna end this on another middle grade. El Defo. Okay, so this is actually a graphic novel, which I don't tend to read very much middle grade, and I definitely don't read graphic novels. I have gotten into manga, but not graphic novels. And I really enjoyed this. Daggum. I didn't love the ending. What's wrong with me? But as a whole, it was such a great book. This is kind of like, actually it's a memoir, I believe the author's note said when I was finished reading it. It's about it's about a bunny, but the woman that wrote it, it was written to tell her story. So she actually, I don't remember what she was diagnosed with. I can't remember what the diagnosis was, and I don't even remember if it was explicitly written in this book or if it was just in the author's note. But this author was born with her hearing, and if I'm remembering correctly, around the age of 6 or 10, somewhere in that area, she lost her hearing, and she had to wear these hearing aids and this hearing device that was strapped to her because it was a while ago, so technology has changed quite a bit. And it talks about her journey of losing her hearing and going to school with this very unique setup, and her experience of figuring out friendships and relationships and figuring out life in general with this change. And it was really, really interesting, and I enjoyed it the entire way through. It's a book that I for sure plan to read to my son when he is of the age where he can understand it a little bit more. And it's one that I recommend. Okay, so these are some books that I think are underrated and deserve a little bit more love, and that I think that a lot of people could potentially enjoy. Like I said, I did already film a video like this, so if you want to check it out, if you want more underrated recommendations, it is linked in the description of this video, as well as all of these books. Oh wait, I forgot Rebecca. Be sure to chat with me about any of these in the comments. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.